Welcome all. I'm Emily, and I'll be hosting our Web 3.0 panel today. Before we start, I'd like to ask our panel speakers to introduce themselves. I guess we can start on this side.
Hello, my name is Mark Dalmocanar. I'm currently working at EPAM Systems as a principal of CPG Digital Commerce Acceleration and helping our CPG clients improving their existing digital commerce initiatives. Prior to this role, I worked in the industry for 16 years in companies like L'Oreal, Mondelez, PepsiCo. And I studied business analytics in Boston and digital transformation at MIT. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to learning a lot from the other guests and the speakers on the event today about the developments of Web3, blockchain, and how we can implement those in the digital marketing and e-commerce industry. Thank you.
I'm Chad Piper. I'm Chief Architect at GoChain. Nice to meet you. And I've been working in industry for a while. I did my graduate work in computer science in Illinois. Did teaching, went into the industry for 16 years now. I'm at Drexel. I'm teaching in the College of Computing Informatics, and I'm into data privacy, data privacy regulation, and Web3. We can facilitate some of the challenges that we're trying to work with.
Hey everyone, Ali Mandavji, Managing Partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. Thrilled to be here, first time in Boston. So we run a venture capital firm. We've got 110 portfolio companies now around the world. We've been doing it for a long time. And our goal is, we just raised a new $75 million fund. So if you do know any great startups that are building cool things in Boston, please share them. We've done a lot of cool things across the space with United Nations over the years. We wrote the first academic case study in the world on Binance with CZ for INSEAD, which is something similar with SoRare. But yeah, excited to be here.
Hi all, this is GP. I'm working as Hello. Hi, this is GP. I'm working as a chief AI scientist for a startup called Deep Singularity LLC. And I have 24 years of experience in the field, including AI, machine learning, blockchain, deep learning, other applications. I'm very excited about this conference and seeing all the brilliant bright minds coming together here. So I'm trying to also pick up their mind to understand their experiences and what I can get from here. I've implemented so far like for 38 customers. I have my PhD from California in mind. So I have a Doctor of Computer Science and postdoc from Colorado Technical University.
All right, thank you all. It's great to have you on board. First off, I'd like to talk about the definition of Web 3.0, which many people may associate with decentralized networks, AI, and machine learning, as well as blockchain technology. Would any of the speakers like to present their thoughts on their understanding of Web 3.0?
Well, let me give it a try. Yeah. So I think I'll bring a different lens from the rest of the speakers because I come from the industry working with the transit manufacturer. Let me try to describe how we see commercial blockchain or consumer blockchain as we describe it, and we can get stakeholders and the experts to speak about it. So the consumer blockchain, as we like to phrase it, we like to see it as built on 4 pillars or 4 components. And obviously those 4 components I can tell could be described as more technical ones where brands can engage with their consumers and people influencing experiences for their consumers. So we can start with the cryptocurrencies, of course, which is both a financial asset tool, also a very important payment token and or tool for the consumers. Second would be NFTs, very hot, very popular, and a lot of brands in different industries are capitalizing on the potential of NFTs. And then we have DeFi, decentralized finance. Of course, another big topic, overlapping multiple industries and brands and manufacturers also trying to get their understanding and wrap their head around on this use case of blockchain. And the fourth, I think we can call it the compliance, because eventually they need to get an understanding about how the engine works under the hood, how they can get comply with the regulations, policies of different markets in different regions, and how can they implement their existing systems and infrastructure in their companies. So at the underlying layer, there's of course consumer behavior shift and changing dynamics of today's consumer economy, which forces many different agencies, companies, states, organizations to adapt those technologies, improve these regulations, and finally making meaningful instances for the consumer. So when we look at those consumer blockchain, of course, there are different driving forces. One of them being the behavior shift in the generation and the consumer. Another one is big tech companies making those investments and attracting new group of new clusters, new audiences to this technology and getting them used to or getting them familiar with the use cases. And finally, brands or manufacturing companies trying to understand how they can utilize this new and unexplored, uncharted territory kind of technology into their 100-years-old ways of working. So this is a very fluid, very dynamic area for many CPGs, and they're looking for guidance and technical support, and also proven use cases, because to be honest with you, no matter which consultancy firm, no matter which tech firm you talk today, there's not many proven, really best-in-class use cases established yet. Everyone is in the trial and error mode. So this is how we see it from brand engagement, consumer lens, as we call it, consumer blockchain. And it's a very dynamic, very fast-growing market. There are great examples out there. We can talk about some of the brands, some of the companies, what they're doing in different use cases. But I'm looking forward to hearing more about the technical definition of how is blockchain evolving.
So we're giggling up here because I had the time to listen and to communicate and socialize the ideas. This is what these conferences are also about. Socializing with different personnel. We're too technical and too so. Well, you're also very technical. You say you're not, but you are. I'm interested in exactly what you said. That was perfect. See, I don't think there's a viable definition. There's no place to go to. You certainly don't go to Wikipedia. I mean, that's not authoritative, right? I tell my students, I'll go to Wikipedia, but I'll look at the references, and then I'll do the Google Scholar. I mean, you certainly want authoritative, but everything you said is absolutely right. And I love the way that you stipulated it from your perspective. What I'm interested in is facilitating everything that you said underneath the hood. Because at the end of the day, when I recall, like I finished my PhD, I'm older than I think. So in 2009, when I finished, I was going to go to the DoD. 2008, in 2009, I interviewed, and the lead engineer said to me, "This is 2009. What is this cloud?" And now we're saying, what is Web 3.0? And what did you say? Yeah, traditional services that we have, traditional services. So now that we're talking about this Web 3.0. So I'm interested in helping facilitate and leveraging the underlying services like decentralized storage. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to provide the actual storage. We have peer-to-peer networks for that, like storage or IPFS. It's a file system IPFS. What I'm saying is that the glue between the component and the system itself, because the data, everyone says it's at rest. It's secured at rest. Well, what happens when it's in motion? And what happens in Web 3.0 when data is where it should be, which is really within the repository of the users who own and control that data? If I got a PhD from Illinois, if you got a PhD, you got a master's, you got undergraduate, you earn those credentials. You shouldn't have to pay a clearinghouse or any other organization to get that. It's your data, it's your credential. All I'm saying is that no matter what the application is, no matter what layer you're at writing at, there are going to be certain chain agnostic technologies. I was just going to say, you got here, right? Where are you from?
Sorry.
Okay. You came from New York. Did you fly American? Did you fly United? How'd you fly? Maybe you didn't fly. Maybe you took a train. Did they tell you exactly what you had to do? Like, he did his own thing, right? Someone else did your own travel. And probably for everybody here. That's what data has to be in Web 3.0. I want my own data. If I want to have this person assist me, that's great. And they can get access to that data. But underlying all of this discussion here, let's not wait for the legal. GDPR didn't wait. GDPR and the United States didn't, well, they were waiting. They kept waiting, right? But GDPR came out, now it sets standard. So decentralized storage and credentialing, verifiable credentialing, and decentralized identifiers. The new social security number, perhaps, I'm not sure. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'm just going to answer sort of maybe very simply. We look at Web3 as essentially the first way to transfer value in a digital, decentralized manner, which is a huge advantage. And then when we think about some of these other concepts, right? So you think about what this does from like a borrowing, lending, and savings products, which is essentially like banking and the ability to democratize banking, I think it creates a whole wealth of opportunities. Like anyone can create essentially a bank account in a second or a wallet, right? And then you look at NFTs, and people think it's JPEGs, and we look at this as, you know, the first way in human history to essentially track ownership in a digital world, right? So there's a ton of innovation that's still unpacking here, and it's going to take time, but we're looking at these probably in very different ways than what the broad market currently is about.
Yeah, I think the way a lot of people are, when they're thinking about Web3, some people are surprised all of a sudden something's coming on the block as Web3, but this concept has been there. But initially, like we take a look at Web 1.0, Tim Berners-Lee has introduced in 1986 more of a static web. It's more like a corporate type of web, like only people can access within their corporations, and it's read-only web. If somebody wants to comment, they can comment anything. So that was the evolution of Web 1.0. Then people that should be more than just static web. People need to be able to interact with that, at least if not have that kind of interaction like a symbiotic web, at least have some sort of comments, write something about it. So then came the next evolution of Web 2.0, where we see a lot of companies like Facebook in 2004, and then YouTube, a number of other social media applications launched with the intent of providing the ability for interaction for all the audience. So, and that's when a lot of the companies have come up with Web 2.0. And then the problem is like some of the companies are not, most of them are like centralized. Basically, they're operated completely centralized, and they like, for example, somebody's going to go and post some data on the YouTube, right? So they can input the data. Then again, somebody posts something on Facebook. Your data is not yours no longer, right? Your tweets are not yours. Your LinkedIn posts are not yours, because we think that it is your intellectual property, but it is not. Anybody can access that information, and anybody can utilize that. Somebody, for example, posts their code on Facebook. People can punch it, and they can utilize it. Right?
So I just want to jump in real quick, because I had a situation recently where on Facebook, even when something wasn't explicitly blocking out, and I'm not condoning it. I personally don't condone social networks, because obviously we're products. And I don't think, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I don't think the internet changed. I think that what evolved was the market. What evolved was the need. What evolved was the lack. Some of my students always write the affirmative, so I shouldn't say it didn't evolve. But we don't have policy behind it, right? So GDPR really came from the EU. The European Union in 2018 was enacted. And that really, in my opinion, is what is helping facilitate this whole run to user really self-sovereign identity, where users can only control their data within the context of very rich, very valuable companies that we're hearing about. But Craigslist could have done it differently, and they chose not to. So I can't say, because Craigslist doesn't care who you are, and they don't want to know who you are, and they don't want your data, and they're okay with that. In fact, there's a thing called misconnections. I'm not sure you know about that. I asked how you flew here, but maybe when you were flying, you looked at someone like this. I'm making eyes right now, everybody, with Jason, making eyes with him. And misconnections is this idea of, hey, maybe I missed my star-crossed lover, somebody that I could have been with the rest of my life, and I missed my opportunity to make that connection. So on missed connections, I would go to the MIT, if it were an MIT, but I came from Philly, I go to Philly, and so I looked at this up, and there was some posts about like, and they're like saying, I was the one with the white raven hair, and I looked at you, and you looked at me, and I guess, and they were hoping that this person comes in and sees this post. That is the epitome of Web 1.0. Like you said, static, completely not bidirectional. Not bidirectional. Just because I left that message, I don't know who the target of that message is. So I'm essentially saying to the whole world, yes, when I was walking across the street, apparently in Philadelphia, I saw somebody. This is the description of them, and I sure wish that you had seen them. And that's it. There's nothing more to it. Web 1.0. Web 2.0, they know that they know, and this doesn't exist, but they would know that they made it, that they made the post. They would know how many people liked it, how many people didn't like it. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. And that's not true, right?
So that's what, like, Web 2.0, as you were talking about, companies taking over the data and stuff like that. So there's a company called Axiton. And this company, actually, they are $1 billion company today. They were started like $1 million company. And if you go and check like your information yourself, then know what ice cream you like, how many pets you have, what car you're going to be driving on the road. They have 5,000 data points built on each individual. And they simply take this information and give to any consumer that they want to utilize them. So that's where 2.0 for us, because the data is not yours. And from $1 million company and turn to $1 billion company, because there is no security for data. And I mean, they can tell you what airlines you fly, everything. Literally built.
Be a little more clear though, and then I think one of your mothers, all this data that they're getting, where are they scraping it from? Are the users giving consent on Facebook and other platforms? You're basically saying, I'm giving my full consent. So this data is essentially yours, right?
They're not, they're just gathering.
So they're getting it publicly. So on Facebook, what I was going to say was that even when you don't share something, there was an example recently where I was able to do a public search for somebody. And if I don't explicitly not deny access to a person, then the person connected to them can search and see the pictures.
Right. That's
just an example. And so when you say security, but I don't want to make this about the social networks. We all signed up for that, right?
Yeah, so that's, and again, the Web 2.0 is powered by the keywords and search terms in order to find it. The Web 3.0, coming to that, is completely a different type of ecosystem altogether. So there's no search or keywords. It's basically, as Tim Berners-Lee has envisioned, like in the 1980s, it's more of a kind of a symbiotic web, what he calls it, and it's basically it's analysis of the search itself. So it's operated by AI and machine learning and blockchain. When all these things come together, that's your Web 3.0, which is not typically the Web 2.0. There's no natural language processing or anything like that that's driving the results. It's just hashtags or it's just keywords and search terms. That's all in Web 2.0. So coming to Web 3.0 is more like a self-reliant, self-sufficient, and self-intelligent. It's not AGI, like artificial general intelligence, but it's getting toward the NLP and a lot of other technologies where everything is synthesized and present to the consumer rather than they having to go for that. That means like people, like for example, somebody is interested in machine learning. So today on Web 2.0, they want to find machine learning. They're going to have to search on some search engines and compile like millions or billions of files and not knowing what's right and what information they're even looking for. But coming to Web 3.0, you can build your own community. And through that community, you're able to find all of your answers you're looking for. And again, it's e-apps, completely decentralized apps. They're not centralized, they're not state-owned, state-operated or anything like that. It's completely American capitalist economy, free open economy. Anybody can buy, anybody can sell, whether it's NFTs, whether it's cryptocurrencies, or any other product that people are intending to sell each other. They can just put it up on a 3.0 and basically they sign into their wallet and then they consume and then they log out. So there's going to be no such sort of thing. Again, the Web 2.0, Web 1.0 are heavily attacked by the cyber hackers. There are a lot of type of phishing and other activities. There is some risk in Web 3.0 as well. For example, like you'll see things like crypto jacking, that we see rug pulls, ice phishing, a few other types of cyber hacks that can happen. But when you compare with Web 2.0, Web 1.0, the hacks are only like below 1%. Coming to Web 1.2, Web 2.2, those are like 80% of hacks that are happening in the market. So that's where they see this Web 3.0 is a milestone for human evolution in terms of the products they build or the product they sell or any other NFTs they offer to cryptocurrency and all that. It's going to be more robust and mostly powered blockchain by either things like Hyperfabric, Ledger, or Quorum, or multi-chain. These are the most popular blockchain tools that are out there. And, but again, there is a possibility of hacking to smart contracts logic. If there is a gap in the smart contracts logic, hackers can get into it. They can hack the code between the blocks of that. So those are the risks and advantages of the Web 3.0. But again, there is also Web 4.0 that's in the works right now for this world. And there's also a Web 5.0 that's coming out by 2030, which is completely called a telepathic web or emotionally interactive web, where it's a break.
I'm not sure, Jason, guys would have stopped this or not, but 102, 03, 04, 05, in 8, so but in 1989, you had Leo saying that what the internet was. He said decentralization in 1989. So there is no Web 102 or 3. This is this is a construct that the companies are using for marketing purposes and for the business, right? So let's be clear here, and let's not scare the audience also. In a Web 2.0 era, Web 3.0 era, I'm not subscribing to that because I haven't gotten the memo from the president of the world that says what Web 1.0, 2, or 3 is. You're right. You said it very early on that he worked at CERN.
The blockchain consortium has released a book officially that they even.
All right, very good. Yeah. That's good. So at least I know that's the reference. That's the reference. All right, that's the reference. Next question.
And John Darcy, the person who left the company Twitter, actually building a Web 5.0, and he said he's going to launch it in 2030.
So again, good information, but used as a marketing ploy and confusing to people. I think I think I'm making the point here that there is no clear, viable definition, and so we're just trying to understand conceivably during this panel what really is Web 3.0. Maybe the next question.
So I'm trying to get this understanding of what Web 3.0 is. What do you guys think are the key technical challenges that need to be solved in order to realize the full potential of this evolving?
So in the industry application, what we see, one of the biggest challenges, it might not be as technical as you might expect in ranking order, but the first challenge for companies who wants to deploy blockchain technology or technology in their day-to-day is skill, resource, people. So basically, they're really challenged to find the right skill set, right qualified roles for these tasks, because consumers are moving faster than the brands and the companies and even consulting firms at some level. We see this on a day-to-day. And even the biggest brands you're familiar with, like Kraft, Mondelez, L'Oreal, Coke of the world, they're really challenged to bring the right amount of skilled people into the right set of roles, describe the roles, and deploy them to day-to-day technical execution, and then figure out how it works and what works for their best business objective. That's number one challenge for companies. Second challenge on the development side, the company that I'm working today, I would say 25% business advisory and consulting, 75% engineering and tech development. And we're working with the giants of the world, all the FANG companies, all the Fortune 500 companies. But the challenge on the technical side is tying the technical capability with the applicable business use case. Because all these brilliant minds around us, all these engineers who's able to build most sophisticated, most cutting edge technology are not able to fit into a business problem, define a business problem, and then go for solve for the problems of marketing teams, commerce teams, supply chain teams. This is another challenge for us because there are so many use cases, but they're not proven. They're at the POC level, proof of concept level in many cases, and it's not ready to answer the consumer demand because consumers, again, moving faster than us. So one of the shortcuts, of course, is like acquisition. What Nike did a couple of years, 1 year ago, they acquired Artifact, and suddenly their 2022 NFT revenue jumped to 122 million. 122 million might sound like a mere dollar amount for a company generating 80 billion a year. But again, this shows the nascency and how early they are on the journey when it comes to this hot, sexy, cutting edge technology we're talking about, but it's only able to generate a little over 100 million for a giant company like Nike, which is the expert or the pioneer of the D2C, direct to consumer. So it shows us there's so much distance to cover, there's so much potential to go on. These are the couple of two challenges that comes to my mind. And of course, again, under the hood, on the technology basis, development and maturity of the technology, there might be more challenges ahead of us. But it's a journey, it's an exploration. And hopefully the big companies like Shopify, Salesforce, Google Cloud, they're also bringing more audiences to these technologies by launching those capabilities. For example, Shopify launched NFT gaming capabilities for their sellers on the platform last June 2022. So therefore, any seller on Shopify are able to control who's accessing their products, who's using their services on the Shopify platform through NFT validation. This one would use for introducing this kind of technology to be layman. Another one would be Salesforce. They've launched their Salesforce 360 NFT minting capability. So any enterprise organization using Salesforce 360 today can mint their own NFT or with their three marketing agency partners and introduce it to consumers, generate some loyalty programs, generate some rewards programs. Another example would be like Google Cloud. They launched Solana validation protocol on GCP. And now anyone, again, using data pipeline, Google Cloud solutions, they can use Solana protocols for validation, therefore bringing it to the enterprise level scale. Those kind of bold and trustworthy applications by the tech giants, bringing those kind of applications to the day-to-day works of both companies and consumers will help us cover the distance and accelerate on the blockchain Web3 journey, where we can bring the business outcome of the technology to billions, if not trillions, from a mere $100+ million. And we're looking forward to this kind of accomplishments.
That was awesome.
So I think there's a couple of things when we start talking about like major challenges, right? So when you take I mean, from a technical perspective, there's sort of a good side and a bad side, right? Like it's early, there's a lot of still, I think, a huge learning curve. But on the other hand, this is probably the fastest moving industry from a tech perspective. And I can sort of explain why, right? So when you take your traditional tech industry, everyone's sort of building in silos. It's very difficult to say like learn and build from others, other than what you can say, see in the public domain and try to like more or less copy, right? But you're not copying their code, you're just copying like, maybe you're looking at the Instagram app and you're like, hey, I like their UI and like, you try to copy it, right? In Web3, what's really cool is you can just fork whatever you want. So you can just literally like take everything they built, fork it, and then keep building, right? And so this is a huge advantage from a speed and even like learning from and sort of taking battle-tested products or services over time and then being able to sort of leverage that. Right, so this is like a huge advantage, and this is why I think the industry is actually able to move, you know, at a more rapid pace than other spaces. Now, there's still obviously big challenges around security, you know, user like education, and onboarding typically sucks from a consumer standpoint, right? So this is like another major problem, and I can sort of give you a quick example that I like to give maybe in terms of like gaming, right? So if we take gaming. And let's say that, you know, to try to explain the user experience problem, like let's say gaming, I'll make up some numbers to just make the math simple. Let's say there's 1 billion gamers in the world. And let's say, you know, you want to build a game in, you know, the most popular genre. So let's say first-person shooters. So let's say there's 100 million first-person shooter gamers in the world. Now, let's say that you're going to build a game on Solana, as an example. Now, because you require gas for transactions, like gas fees, now your market size just went from 100 million first-person shooter gamers to the middle of a Venn diagram between Solana users and first-person shooter gamers, which now might only be like 500,000 as your total market size per million. So this creates a huge issue that needs to be solved. This is where we think either gasless blockchains are quite interesting, or you know, some sort of solution where this onboarding problem is resolved without requiring, you know, new users or onboarding or a certain number of transactions where, you know, the users don't need to be paying for them, because it does create massive problems when you think about, you know, that user experience and education problem.
Yeah, so I mean, whatever I was talking about earlier, the Web 1.0 to Web 5.0 is something also written in a book released in 2018. And also it covers all the AI and machine learning technologies to 2100. It's not like Ray Kurzweil book where we expect singularity in 2030, but more practical. What can be achieved and not. You guys want to refer it, you can find it on Amazon as well. I wrote 3 books so far. So that's what I was talking about. Whatever I said is already in the book I written. And that has been actually adopted by the blockchain consortium for these terms of Web 1.0.
I got you. Okay, so now we're understanding. We didn't get the memo at the beginning. So you've written a few books.
Yes.
And now you're saying that the topics that we're talking about are orthogonal to those books. So we'll make sure to get a link, at least in text, so people can see what the books are from this. The question was about the technology. I think hearing the business.
Technology challenges, what I think about are like mostly just like any other SQL database or any other, the challenges are for the performance tuning of these blockchain technologies, especially when you're having millions and billions of volumes of these transactions going through the nodes. It's pretty complex to retrieve.
Okay, let's put it in perspective for the audience. So what we're saying is we have this Web 3.0 stuff we're talking about. We have companies here that are investing in a bunch of things, and you have problems you're trying to solve. My friend Mark DeMondelez, he was the one that said, if you take some of this cream out, this amount of cream, you can save $26 million. So I understand the problems of what you're saying. The question is, what are the companies? The companies have to decide what the risks are and they're involved, right? And so with Web 3.0, we're talking about this idea that users should own and control their data. So the real question has to be, where does the data reside, even in the gaming world? Where does the data reside? Anything that's personally identifiable information. In English, any information. And you're going to read about sensitive personally identifiable information in the state laws now. There are 6 that are enacted, and the rest of them are in process, they're in committee. But exactly what constitutes privacy? Well, if you have an STD, if you have a disease, that's considered private. Well, for me, personally identified information is any data that can be used to correlate your identity.
Yeah, so that's it.
So your Facebook data, any of your social network stuff, in attestations verifiably by machine to machine. That's
a very good use case that you just brought up. I was going to talk about it actually. For companies like Pfizer and a number of other companies, they're actually sharing on blockchain the clinical trials. So
I did see that.
So that's a great use case.
Yeah, I saw that, and the first thing I thought to myself was, I would never store any of this data on a chain ever. I understand that is a trial used for a bunch of people.
Yeah, because in order to introduce a drug into the market, it takes 7 years. Utilizing these clinical trials, they're cutting the time to half because, for example, Pfizer already has conducted clinical trials, which is the regulation for FDA, whatever the limit they need to reach. So not any other medical company, for example, Johnson & Johnson can subscribe to the blockchain node, and they can utilize that information.
Okay, we should get a link for that too, because I want to make sure we're not confusing the issue. For people who aren't fully aware, we don't store any data on chain. If you are a company and you're doing your own POC within your own ecosystem, certainly you can do whatever you want to do. There are a couple of those, but as an author of a textbook on blockchain, you would never condone the storage of any PII on a blockchain. You would always use off storage. Yeah.
No, the subject's information is completely
anonymous. You say
up there. Yeah.
Okay. So then
they're not going to have any. It's just subjects like for example, like 2,000 subjects information is given as clinical trials to other companies.
I understand. Let me say context for the question was asked. The question was asked. So the context here is, and what you said. The question is, okay, so how do you organize all this? What is the policy related to that? In the academia, there are IRBs. There are documents that you have to put together to explain the study, explain the sensitive data being accessed, and all the pieces people have to accept it. Okay, so what you were mentioning was there are problems, and what are the political, technical, compliance? What was legal? What are those? Reasons for making decisions. And so this explains it. You even have still POCs that are happening where there's still discussion amongst them. So the issue is that this is still nascent, as you said, and that there's still decisions that have to be made. And at the end of the day, there's no policy in place to make sure that you're executing that correctly. So I think we've exhausted the second question, perhaps, but I'm not sure.
So basically, technologically, the out-of-the-box solution is provided by the tools I was talking about, like, for example, hyperfabric ledger or core or multi-chain, they have their own security layers built in. How they're going to encapsulate this information so that it's not accessible.
Understood. See, last thing I want to say is that, yeah.
You can just finish. I'm just trying
to. We have to get to all the questions or no? We have.
Okay. I would just love to hear you finish. It'd be great.
Yeah, so the companies that are encapsulating again, the policy of security is like out of the box delivered functionality policy versus companies are also, corporates are coming forward asking for a particular type of security layer introduced, which is not there today. But this entire blockchain is customizable. And technically, they're able to customize, introduce code, introduce additional security policies and all that. They're able to add that. So those are the technical challenges that they are trying to solve into this world. So that's the use case because I was involved in a few of these implementations. And the other issue I faced was about this performance tuning. Like if we want to retrieve information, it's taking weeks. And the expectation initially was like, for example, like we build something in the like a sandbox environment, and we try to retrieve it was so fast, so people got up and let's just move to quality and production environments. But when it comes to quality, it's crashing. A single badger is not completing like a couple of weeks. Right? So those are the type of challenges that we have.
You even jumped ahead of me there talking about the next question, what role will blockchain play in Web 3.0? You guys already touched on it, so that's really cool. Well, as a future economics major, I would like to know your thoughts on the potential economic and social impacts of Web 3.0.
Now, answering this question, I will refer one of my dear friends, Peter C. Evans' work on this one, because he's an MIT professor also and head of marketplace platform strategy in the Institute of Digital Economy at MIT. But we discussed on this work on this, and I was another topic talking about this. So basically, economic impact of blockchain and Web3 is twofold. Let's think about two possibilities: bear growth or bull growth, or bear direction, bull direction, and then let's tie it to involvement of events like Chad described, whether it's going to be centralized or decentralized. So if we look at a matrix, an x-axis, let's think about centralized and decentralized, and y-axis would be bear growth and bull growth. So this analogy of Peter, it lays out 4 different scenarios for us, and it's a really solid work. I'll definitely share the link at the web portal or any other event we can share with the audience so you can go and look at the material we produced. Basically, let's look at the bear scenario. And if we go in the bear market, if blockchain and Web3 doesn't deliver the promise it's been discussed lately, and all the hopes of ours will just die, we're looking at still 5% global GDP impact on the economy. And if everything turns out in the bull market, everything goes flourishing and thriving in the next 10 years or so, then we're looking at about roughly 15% of global GDP, and it's around 18 to 20 trillion dollars. But this is the economic impact of Web3 applications being explored and experimented today, which none of them still mature. Can we agree on that? And also we can look at the centralization or decentralization of this scenario. If everything goes centralized, and let's look at the ecosystem of today, like we're discussing today, but let's understand that blockchain is not a uniform, very well mature platform today. There are public blockchains, there are private blockchains. If you look at what Jamie Dimon was saying 2 years ago about Bitcoin, he was criticizing about Bitcoin's asset value, but JP Morgan is a private blockchain network today for its private investors. So all JP Morgan investors can use this private blockchain solely accessible for JP Morgan clients. But on the public domain, we can hear on and off or different comments. So there are governments trying to build their own centralized or central bank currency. So they're also controlling the federal regulations on the public companies. There are more than 3,000 cryptocurrencies today. So what I'm trying to depict here is blockchain ecosystem is not one blockchain, not uniform, it's very fragmented, and there are many different applications. So let's get back to the metrics I was describing. We have 4 of those scenarios. If we go centralized and bear market, we're going to the rug pull impact. Or if it's decentralizing bear market, we can go the network tribalization. So my currency, cryptocurrency is better than Chad's cryptocurrency. My private blockchain as a corporation is better than public blockchain. So it's decentralized, but everybody can get to hold of their own blockchain methodology. So we start fighting against each other. So this is the other scenario when it's decentralized and bear market. But the good scenario, we can look at great equalizer. If it goes decentralized and if it goes in the bull direction, suddenly we're receiving all these promises Web 3.0 delivering for us. Okay, we're getting our privacy, we're getting our ubiquity, we're getting our data, we're getting rid of all these intermediary platforms, owning our data and selling it back to us and advertisers. No more Googles, no more Facebooks, no more intermediary data repositories. So those are the different directions it can go. And again, none of them is certain, none of them is guaranteed yet. But the economic impact is roughly about 5 to 15% of the global GDP, depending on which direction we go. And we will see how the policy will turn out, whether state form, central bank form, or healthcare privacy laws like GDPR, Chad giving examples. And I'm on the optimistic side. I'm always an optimistic. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm Mediterranean or studying the topic a little bit. So I'm thinking that it's going to go in the great equalizer way. And hopefully, community, the brilliant minds behind this technology and the consumer on the receiving end of this will force all these changes, because now new generations come into the mix. Gen Z is already a pretty mature generation. We're also talking about Generation Alpha. So Generation Alpha, about 10 to 12 years old, and dictating their parents what to buy, what to do with their daily lives. So, but none of us reading anything about Gen Alpha yet. But consumer brands are studying Gen Alpha, believe it or not. So hopefully the consumer behavior and the brilliant individual revolutionary minds, like all these people here, will pull us into the direction for the great equalizer, where blockchain is decentralized and forcing for a bull's market. That's my hope and dream.
Yeah, put a web on that.
And I mean, we maybe look at it. I mean, we're obviously quite bullish on the technology with 110 companies now. The plans to back another 200 companies over the next few years. But you know, we basically look at it in terms of like, there's essentially going to be inevitably a decentralized world and a centralized world of this technology, right? And so the more regulation that you have, that just means there's going to be a bit more on the regulated or centralized sort of side, most likely, or semi-centralized, and the decentralized world is still going to exist, right? And it's still going to grow. And so, you know, we do think that this creates a lot of opportunities. You know, we talked about the ability to sort of transfer value and, you know, democratize, you know, certain things probably in the developing world, right? So when you think about like borrowing, lendings and savings products not being through centralized entities, right? Which clearly, like, we're not solving this problem with the current system, right? We've got 1 billion people without identity. Like, no one really cares, right? Like, we're not solving this through, you know, them sort of joining the existing system. Like most developing country banks basically have to work with international banks, but international banks don't want to work with developing country banks because of a term called de-risking, but basically they take the risk, they no longer want to work with them, they cut off the developing world. This is why you have like a lot of issues even in the developing world. So like, you know, you got over 1 billion people without banking. Like, we're not solving this problem on the current system, right? So this starts to create, I think, a really interesting way to democratize this and solve this, but there's going to be a lot of growing pains, but maybe we can leapfrog the existing system. You know, when you take even from like a simplicity sort of standpoint, even as simple as say like gaming, right? We started investing in blockchain gaming in 2018, right? There was 2 blockchain games in the world and people thought we were crazy, but like when we look at this, we see it as a very interesting way to, you know, basically turn effort and time into value, which right now is generally from games not accepted, and it's usually against the terms of service to be able to turn this stuff into money, right? Like to be able to enter real world money, because they want to control that. But we actually see a really interesting opportunity to start democratizing this. We think the entire gaming industry is going to move into essentially a space where you actually do own your assets. And we're already seeing that, right? So we're one of the largest investors in one of the biggest blockchain games in the world. And you're seeing this across a lot of different spaces, right? So, you know, we've literally got investments across nearly every sector of this space. And we do see sort of inevitably that the world is going to move more into a blockchain sort of side, but It just depends if it's going to be, the regulated side or the non-regulated side. And the regulated side has its own challenges, right? So like you can use this technology for good or evil, as you can with basically any technology, right? I mean, you take central bank digital currencies, a lot of people are talking about this. I mean, we were working with the UN on this, I think, since 2016. And one of the problems that we brought up is like, I mean, you could literally use this for good and try to stamp out, corruption, inefficiency, all of these other things. But you could also use it from the standpoint of like, let's go after our political opponents and, like centralize essentially a lot more power, right? You could use it to go after consumers for doing the wrong thing, right? Like if, I don't know, consumers buy too much, like, I don't know, let's say beer and alcohol, and they have kids and they're not buying diapers, can you hold it against them, right? Like these are easily things you could go after on, like, are they a good citizen or not, right? So like there's all of these different challenges that I think are going to arise from just like a control perspective and trying to use this technology in different ways.
So the biggest economic impact I see is basically there is a technology, blockchain. There are a lot of POCs. There are actual companies that are utilizing as well, but the performance bottleneck is the primary key for it, because we need to have high availability and high scalability of applications in blockchain, especially the smart contract logic, the way it runs. The reason why I was talking about cryptojacking earlier, a lot of blockchain miners are cryptojacking the GPUs on the households, like anybody's household, and running parallel. Because for this type of information and this much of logic calculation, we need something like a supercomputer. Just like we are connecting a lot of other plasma turbulence or thermal acceleration and things like that. Blockchain requires such type of a hardware, and it is impractical to launch like a Web3 for the entire world with the current architecture and infrastructure that we have is going to be the biggest thing. That means like an average supercomputer costs like, let's just take an example of the big red 200 costs like $7 million. So if you go for Int'l Aurora, which is the fastest supercomputer in the world, that costs $100 million. So computers like this is what we need to process information like this. But we are not looking at that right now. That is a huge economic impact because companies need to be prepared to come up with their hardware. Otherwise, they just implement and they run. And then they're not moving forward because they can't operate at that scale.
Yeah, I just don't think we can fork everything. I mean, you could fork Web 2.0 and Web 1.0 as well. Web 1.0 to exist. You could fork, but I think what you're saying is absolutely right. We don't know how it's going to scale and how it's going to work together. And Polkadot with their multi-chain is an approach to be chain agnostic. But I agree. It's interesting too in terms of what you were saying. There are companies that want to bridge the gap between the apps. Like we had a company that says, "Look, I want people to be able to be Web 2.0 within your D app. Can you do that?" Yeah, we do that. You can still give ownership to Web 2.0. It's just that there's not the wallet and the wallet and the currency. When you look at the videos, it's more about the wallet being attached, and all of a sudden that's Web 3.0. But there are traditional systems that want to play along. They want to play with that scalability. But yeah, what's the glue for the services that before have been third-party based? And I heard you just you gave third parties. Salesforce can help facilitate the move towards there if they're compliant and you're good with that, and that makes sense. So I think playing together and figuring out how to, do you do it on your own? Do you do it as a SaaS? Does SaaS? I think SaaS changes software as a service. I think SaaS changes in this area. I think Web 3.0 changes SaaS because now the data can't be stored decentralized, right?
But there is even actually PaaS that we've been using for that. Like basically, they take care of everything except for the database and the build activities. They operate.
Can you talk to how the process of development has to change to facilitate that?
Yeah, because if it's IaaS, like infrastructure as a service, and there's still a lot of challenges that consumers need to adopt in terms of how much that they need to actually operate on it. But PaaS is what we need, but we're not having so many PaaS companies. Like, for example, we take Cloud Foundry or we take Kaima Environment. There are a few companies or even Azure, Amazon, and other companies offer those kind of, they can spin a cluster in no time.
Web 3.0 out of the box.
Yeah,
but
Web 3.0.
Out of the box.
Yeah.
But then the issue of compliance and whether the risk, because GDPR, but we have CCPA, we have 6 states, so the organization would have to look if, I guess, if their information systems are deployed within those states, they have to look at the state law, not just the federal law, with a lack of federal law. But what I was trying to get at is you can fork, you can do this stuff, but still you have processes that are in place now. SEC DevOps is one of them, where the pipelining of the development process to deploy and maintain is not integrating this new Web 3.0 era. And so privacy by design perhaps wasn't there. I think everything you're saying is absolutely correct. The question is, how do we demystify it for the companies to make the right decisions? And it sounds like you're saying.
This is one of the great areas that blockchain is moving so fast, and companies are still trying to figure out how to tackle the challenges they have ahead of them, let alone the technological barriers. This is a very good opportunity where we don't see many other occasions in the past applications for consortiums. With blockchain consortiums built by different industry-specific companies, let's call them clusters. And while they were competing in their traditional markets, traditional categories, industry, to reach to the highest market share, they're bringing their skilled group of people in the CIO tower, CTO tower, CMO tower, and trying to figure out how we're going to make this work for us while we're making meaningful for the consumer, while they're still continuing to compete. Because again, there are challenges ahead, but there's also bigger gains. And some of these challenges can only be solved when they put their heads together and work cohesively. That's why blockchain consortium, you will see a lot of good examples, which wasn't possible in the past because everything is so saturated. Everything is pretty much matured out in the last 150 years, whether it's supply chain, whether it's finance, whether it's manufacturing. So everything was so perfected at the maximum level, there was not much wiggle room. But now blockchain is still in its nascency of the journey, and companies are trying to get ahead of each other while they're trying to work together. Otherwise, they won't be able to reach enough output or throughput. So that's why we will see more and more consortia developments in different industries. I think energy is one of them, healthcare is another, finance, and security is not there yet. The companies I've worked at in the past, they're still trying to operate individually, but healthcare, finance, and energy, I see a lot of consortia efforts building up between competitors.
So I'm gonna touch on this because maybe my viewpoint's a little bit different, but I think consortiums is actually essentially what you see in sort of like traditional industries. It's almost like Web 1, Web 2 in some ideas, right? Like one of the big innovations of Web 3 is the ability to basically partner with people without counterparty risk, right? Like, so you don't need to know who you're partnering with. It's like the ability to democratize and partner using smart contracts and like leveraging like technology in this way. I'm not saying that there's no benefit still in a consortium. I'm just saying that like you can now partner with people without knowing who they are. Like we have a company, so we started investing in the intersection of AI and blockchain in 19, and also people that were a little crazy when we started doing that because people didn't get it. And one of our companies, for example, anyone can put up GPU power to train AI models, and then we're using AI models for all sorts of stuff, like including in gaming. Like we're launching the first like AI-powered soccer league or football league with FIFA, right? But like lots of really cool stuff where now anybody can contribute to it. You don't need to know the other people. You don't need to know, it's all smart contracts, right? So I think this is one of the really cool advantages when you start understanding the power of unlocking and doing business in a world where you don't need to actually worry about counterparty risk in the same way you do in the traditional world.
Thank you for your thoughts. It was really interesting word that we were talking about the decentralized market and the bull market together. And hopefully after 4 years of undergrad, I can change it. Well, not only am I an intended economics major, I am also part of Gen Z. So how do you guys think this will help, like Web 3.0, how do you think it'll benefit my favorite YouTubers and Instagram, TikTok?
Of course, the most advanced solution right now being adopted and expanded in different use cases, the NFT tokenization solutions offered by the brand. So brands are figuring out different ways of using those NFT solutions to increase their customer lifetime value, increase their brand loyalty and brand engagement opportunities, and also secure some of the transactions they offer for these consumers. So when you look at the current, relatively more advanced use cases of blockchain technology, which is driven largely by the Gen Z and the new generation of consumer behavior shift, is like luxury goods. When you buy a luxury good, you're always checking the authenticity. So tokenization of this luxury good by brands like Louis Vuitton or Cartier is one use case of blockchain in terms of NFT tokenization or certification. Another one is warranty. When you buy an electronic equipment, when you buy a Peloton or your Hydro or your expensive car, so all your warranty and services contract can be tokenized. So you don't need to look for your paper records, you don't need to call your customer service, and everything is guaranteed and it can be stored in your wallet. Absolutely. You can have your MetaMask, and you can store all these documentation, all these contracts, all these validated certifications in your MetaMask, and you can own this data. So you don't need to rely on customer service or a data repository. Another use case, and this is a very advanced large chunk of the use cases right now, is the transportation freight company. One of the largest freight company in the world, Mars, Danish company operating in every country in the world. Every vessel on any seas in the world are tracked on blockchain. So every time a ship checks in a custom port, like every time it's accessed on the insurance documentation, etc., everything is transacted on blockchain protocol. So these are the use cases. Some of them are applicable to the Generation Z or the consumer behavior. Some of them are applicable to the enterprise level, very advanced mature industries. Those are driving the change, and those are impacting our daily life. So what's the outcome? Or how is it going to impact us? For instance, finance and banking industry, credit card companies will lose their lucrative businesses of commission fees. Every time you swipe your credit card or read your chip, Square or Visa, MasterCard of the world charge you 1.75% or some different percentage for the validation. Because
how about the data that they also have that they're getting?
Exactly.
But to get more money from the data. I mean, the transaction, you're going to still get transactions.
Right.
You can't.
Right. This has been great, by the way. Right. So, I'm going to tell you what I would say to you, okay? Because my daughter, I don't even know what Gen Z is. I have a 9-year-old. She's my own. I have one 9-year-old. That's it. Okay. But I don't know what else. I don't know what all these things are. Let me say this: you can own your data. You can sell it when you want. You don't have to be a product anymore. On the Matrix movie, you were a battery. In Facebook, Meta, I guess you are a $50 bill, maybe a $100 bill, but all the data, all your credentials, anything, yes, we have to figure out how to package it so it can be used, but it has to be authenticated and verifiable. And I'm saying you could own that. You don't have to go through a middle. You spent the money on the college degree. It should be in your wallet. And so I want all people, I want my daughter, and don't worry, because with the specification, we can allow people under the age that are legal to be the subject of these credentials, of these authentication, of whatever it is we're storing. You went to elementary school, you went to junior high school, you weren't just successful before you got into NYU, congratulations. But you were successful growing up. Your participation here is part of who you are and part of how you have developed an interest and stuff. All of that doesn't belong within one ecosystem, stovepipe. It belongs in your ecosystem because it's you.
So I'm going to touch on, sort of going back to the original question on like, essentially how this helps Gen Z or like, relating it to the US or like influencers and stuff like this. I think most of this stuff's crap, right? So like, I mean, a lot of these NFTs that are launched are literally just money grabs. Like you might as well just light them on fire, right? I mean, it's like the same thing. Now there is a benefit if it's done right. And I think there's maybe still a misconception on, NFTs in reality are supposed to essentially create like a community to an extent, but that community doesn't really exist effectively in like where it could go. And I think when you start including things like governance aspects and like how does the future of something operate, effectively, and like giving power and control in some ways to a broader group of a community is quite interesting. And I think it's still an experiment. And I think a lot of it's not fully figured out, but I do think it's valuable, right? So we're the first investor in a company called Splinterlands, one of the biggest blockchain games in the world. And they've actually fully decentralized the governance. So if anyone can put together a proposal, push it out, probably every day or every other day, there's like a proposal on there where people can vote. There's literally like thousands or tens of thousands of people literally voting on these proposals. And that actually governs the direction of basically everything this company is doing, which is really, really cool. And it's still an experiment, though. It's still early. It's probably one of the better cases of decentralized governance that we've seen. But I think there's still a long way to go on this. But when you start doing those types of aspects and you can start creating like hyper engagement with communities, it does, I think, become quite interesting. But there's also a human need to try to keep control and retain control, right? So this is where it sort of counters maybe a lot of the ways things have typically works. But we are pretty excited about how does this as a holistic manner move into like communities that are actually hyper engaged. And I think that's more where the power is, but it's not in these like one-off NFT sales where they're making promises and usually 99% of the time not delivering.
And the creators economy, to your question again, I think one of the biggest benefits that the participants of this creator economy or people who like to generate their art, their expressions in different domains will be able to own their product, and they won't be able to verify ownership through a third party, and they won't have to pay all these trademarks or notary fees and et cetera, et cetera. That's number one. And there will be different platforms already in the making, like YouTube we've been exposed to nowadays, and now there's another gig economy platform where creators, where artists can exchange and promote their own art, just like Napster disrupted the music industry 30 years ago, when the MP3s with the torrent file were exchanged, and suddenly Steve Jobs decided to create iTunes and iPhone and revolutionize the music. So we're going to witness some of this at some scale, where all this new generation of gig economy or creator economy participants, they will be able to own, market, and we collect their own earnings. And of course, there will be a lot of other financial gains on our day-to-day, all these banking fees, transaction fees, notary fees we discussed. And most and foremost, there will be again peer-to-peer connection, like Web 3.0, because we won't be able to meet any intermediary, we won't be able to meet any platform to connect anyone who want to reach out in the world in the blockchain ecosystem. So what we know today will be totally different, because we don't need to generate a query or some information for some website for someone that we want to reach as we operate today. The Web 3.0 or blockchain ecosystem will detect in a semantic way our behaviors, our intention, and we will have some of those information thrown at us even before we put any manual inquiry or any other input into any other platform. The most fascinating example I like on this is the Minority Report from Tom Cruise. If you remember the newspaper he was reading in the subway ride, newspaper content is updated based on his day-to-day life or based on his mood. So this is what Web3 is going to be about. This is how we're going to choose our products and operate when we're walking around the store, because the display will change according to our past consumer history, past purchase history, and our day-to-day behavior. So the store display will update according to the consumer who's walking by in the 3 square foot space, and micro fulfillment in behind of the store will be ready to ship it to our home. It will be set foot out of the store. So these are some day-to-day advantages or gains we're expecting from blockchain or Web 3.0. And your generation is forcing it for us. We appreciate you.
Right. And how do you think about that? How do you think about that? Let's end it with that.
Yeah, it's a little bit intimidating, especially with all the different directions you go in. But I think, like what Ali said, if we use it in the right way and use it correctly, then I think it's going to exist.
Okay, so I do have some questions here. So if you guys have questions, you will come. So I would like to ask AA. In the past several years, I do some investments, help the staff in companies. I do blockchain project here. I do BTC mining, but for the Web3, I think it's kind of special because most of my company we go IPO. We have a token here. But just last year, one team came to me, demo to me. They don't want to go IPO. They don't have a token. So what is your part for the Web3 startup company? Do they really need to have the token, or they can go some other way to reach the fund?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we've been involved, across the entire spectrum, right? So we invest very early into companies. Typically pre-seed seed is sort of our first checks. We write 200K and then we go up to 5 million on follow-ons. But I've also been on the board of several public companies in the traditional sort of public markets. I think if you're a B2C company, so consumer focused, like a token can be valuable in sort of creating some of that hyper engaged sort of community aspects. If you're a B2B company, there's generally less of a reason and less success with a lot of those tokens. So I think it depends on what the purpose is. I think there's too many people that create a token for the sake of creating a token, and actually usually backfires. A lot of people think a token's a positive thing. We look at it as there's both a positive and a negative aspect. So when you take I'll try to give you an example. I don't know how many people have iPhones here. Yeah. Okay. Most people. Okay. Looks like almost everyone actually. So when Apple's stock goes down, do you care? Does it impact your experience with your iPhone? You don't care, right? So I think the difference is in the crypto world, or when there's a token, like you're a user of the product, but you're also financially linked in some ways to that. So like when the token goes up, you now, instead of just being an iPhone user, you're now becoming like iPhone's ambassador. You're like, hey, you got to use an iPhone, you got to use an iPhone, you got to use an iPhone. But when it goes down, you're going to literally be like, oh man, this thing sucks. Like I'm going to basically try to get out of it. And so you get the positive exponential impact in good markets, and you get the negative, what we call the death spiral in bad markets. And that's what you're seeing, when markets pull back. And that's why you're seeing like probably faster failures in some cases with Web3 companies when they have a token. So I think it depends.
Is it bad for development as well? So
I think you asked the question of if it's bad for development. I don't necessarily know if volatility is bad for development. I think it depends on just how you manage risk. Would volatility of a stock really impact development of a stock as an example, like development of a company that has a stock? Like, does Microsoft's development get impacted by the stock price? Like you could argue maybe a little, but probably not. Like it's actually kind of not that related. I'd probably think of it just in terms of how you manage risk.
If you have like many of the companies that are on, I'm sorry.
Let's go to okay, Andrew, pass it back to you.
Yeah. So my question is, a lot of companies retroactively try to retrofit the blockchain on their use cases. What are some of the use cases that are not ideal for the blockchain or the Web3, according to you?
We see way too many. So for context, we looked at 632 companies last month alone, right? And we made 5 investments. So like we look at a lot of stuff. You see a lot of people, I think, trying to do things that either don't need blockchain or it's probably way too early.
You have feedback from people that are evaluating applications of 600 applications. Put these in the pile. These don't require blockchain. Oh, these are great topics. Can you tell us?
Yeah, there's some pretty funny ones that we'll see out there, but you'll see companies launch tokens for everything, or like try to retrofit, I don't know, like you were saying, like tokens or blockchain into a lot of things. If we don't see, so generally when we think of tokens, like we do generally want to see some sort of like consumer aspect or some reason why this would be adopted or why the community would sort of surround, around this. When you think about a blockchain, we want to see it being able to solve like some sort of critical like multi-party trust issue, for there to actually be a need for a blockchain. You can use centralized databases to solve a lot of problems, right? So you don't need blockchains to do this. But I'll give you an example of maybe like some cool stuff people aren't thinking about, right? So you take like the music industry, and most people might not be aware of, for example, like streaming fraud and challenges in the music industry around like misreported plays and things like this. And so this is actually a problem that basically everybody in the streaming industry is facing this problem, right? So Universal will go to Spotify and say like, hey, where's the royalties? And the numbers that Spotify might be reporting are not entirely accurate, or any other streaming services, Gavi, et cetera, right? So this is like a very important problem where there's artists then that are setting up like streaming farms or like bot farms to basically help drive streams because they're getting more money from it, right? And so this is actually even like some people use this as like a marketing way to like, break an artist, right? Like grow an artist. And so we invest in a company that's essentially an enterprise solution around that's using blockchain, but essentially it's a private blockchain that's like multi-party between the records and labels and the streaming services. And so we're onboarding, these streaming services to essentially become almost like a real-time auditor for music streams. And so it's not fully consumer facing, but we actually then are tracking every single stream that's played on these streaming services. And so now it's billions of streams. But you got a lot of really cool things like this where you're not thinking that blockchain actually needs to be involved, but how else do you solve a multi-party trust issue?
Great use case.
Hey, you mentioned Tim Berners-Lee several times earlier. Are you familiar with the work that he's been doing with pods? I'm curious if you guys think that those kinds of things could exist on the blockchain. How would that look like? On this, you brought up Minority Report. I'd like to remind people Minority Report was dystopian, and so there are aspects of on the subway, paper. It's my data, right? And so you just more ways to manipulate my actions is really what I heard. And so with some of the ideas that Tim Berners-Lee has with pods and my data, I own it. I can give my data for Facebook to decide how they're going to act, but I can also take it back. Is that, can that happen?
It can happen. It happens now. It's not a problem. What we didn't say here is that they would explicitly share that data, right? Where right now you are implicitly sharing that data with Facebook until you explicitly go into your settings and say you don't want to share that with this explicit person. I want to go visit my mother. I have to go through the gate. Who are you here to visit? Right? You ask me who am I here to visit? I'm here to visit 64 my mother's address. I shouldn't say it on the okay. I'm here. Okay. That's a defensive debt strategy, right? So underlying all this intertwined complexity of politics and laws and technology complexity for you, right? For my daughter who's 9, is going to be what is the legality? At the end of the day, you're asking questions, what's the legal going to be in 10 years from now? What's the legal going to be from 5 years from now? That's a job that we heard you talking about in terms of decision making. Talking about technology to support those decisions. Written 3 books about it. We're going to get links on that. You've invested in companies that are doing all of that. And yet the question comes out, okay, all we have to say is that, okay, in this product, users will provide explicit, they will allow the sharing of this data. So how that's exactly done, you're right. It's ambiguous. It doesn't exist right now, but that's the stage that's being set, and the performance is waiting. We're waiting for the performance. A lot of people are working on it. That's a great question. Who's working on that? And you can tell us about a lot of companies you invested in that are working on it. Talk about companies that are actually not needing investment because they're $1 billion in.
Well, we touched upon blockchain and Web3 a lot, but I think it's going to be the first time we mentioned DAOs or decentralized apps. And you know that DAO is an organization who can run a company in its entirety on a software, but on a blockchain protocol without any human DNA involved. So yes, there's a chance, slight chance, we can go in a dystopian scenario. In this case, if things go out of control with the generative AI, et cetera, et cetera. There will be speculations around it, which I want today, but there's a slight risk in that. But to your question, yes, there are still many avenues to explore. There's still many different use cases to be trial and error until we figure out what's ethic, what's applicable, what's beneficial for society, for the greater good in the long run. And think of 1994. Did we know that we're going to end up here today in 1994 when eBay and Amazon popped up? No. And that's where Bezos had a saying that if you know the outcome, it's not an experiment. Or if you know that it's going to be a success, it's not an experiment, something like this. I think there's no one can say that blockchain or Web3 explorations will be a success yet. We're not that certain yet. We have hopes, we have aspirations, we have some early encouraging results, but I don't think we're anywhere near where we were in 1994 that e-commerce will blow out and will be a success. So there's still some nascency, again, back to the original comment. That's a fun part and an exciting part of it, because if we can trailblaze a path who will be the maybe early generation of Wikipedia somewhere 20 years from now. I don't know what it's going to be called on Web 3.0. But hopefully we'll be those people, trailblazers, and bold enough to path the forward towards an alpha anyway. But again, there's always a slight chance to go out of control, get dystopian, or hopefully things will be better managed this time with the experiences we had.
We'll leave that to lawmakers now. Is it a law? Is it a power?
Again, I mean, I'm sure there will be some regulation at some point. We won't know at what degree and by what authority, because things will be explored and implemented. But again, as I said, there are 4 scenarios currently being discussed today. Rug of pool scenario, network tribalization scenario, great equalizer scenario, and national currency scenario. Let's call it that way. Because you can still be decentralized, but still can be controlled by a central bank currency. That's another scenario. So we'll see how it evolves. And to be honest with you personally, I'm excited to be listening to all these comments, experiences, learning from all the other people's thoughts. And some of those thoughts will be the determining scenarios that we're going to adopt in a couple of years, maybe. None of this we're trying to get defend today might have to be the multiple outcome. Maybe some of the brilliant new ideas come from a user's point of view, consumer point of view, will be the determining factor that we will all have changed direction and move forward. So we'll see. It's too early in the journey. That's what I can say on my end. And at least companies are not even investing enough. I can tell you that many manufacturing companies, many brands, with all their might and power, they're still investing a lot of money in relatively older technologies to optimize their supply chain to overcome the bottlenecks we're experiencing today, or to invest in their finance software to make sure that e-commerce profits are not double booked or not shifted from one channel to another. Those are problems of 30 years ago. And most of the big investments go in those old problems.
Because there are problems that they're solving that are helping facilitate their current business. And we're talking here about transparency and extended supply chain. Yeah. And that's an excellent use case, a known excellent use case that's used.
Exactly. So let's wait and see when the big gamers, big players decide to invest more and more of their funds to this industry and see what happens next. And hopefully some of the early investments, audience companies making, some of the current engagements my company is making, we're building those technologies for clients. They will help them to open floodgates in terms of investment.
Okay, so I think in the past we are over 50 minutes, but let's motion.
Okay. So it seems like obviously, first of all, thank you all for being here Saturday. Really helpful. So it seems like we're kind of waiting for that ChatGPT moment, like it's for AI. Like it seems like everybody is talking about Web3, blockchain for quite some years now, but they haven't found that ChatGPT moment where it immediately becomes, I guess, obvious how powerful the technology is. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you see it as blockchain, but we will have that moment, or it's just going to be a gradual over a long period of time? Then you mentioned it.
It's a good question, right? So I think we still are going to take some time. I think there's a lot of gaps that we still see in the market that are required for this technology to fully go mainstream. I mean, it's part of the way that we even think about investing. So we have 25 open sub thesis where we think there's major problems in the Web3 space and no market leader. And then that's part of the areas that we're looking for companies in, right? So we do think there's a lot of issues still, or gaps at least, in terms of like really taking a lot of the tech mainstream. I mean, the second problem is we burned a lot of consumers as an industry, right? Like, and it's just, consumers also maybe didn't fully understand the nuances, but like you take what's happened over the last year, and a lot of consumers don't fully understand the difference between like centralization and decentralization in the industry. And then, the mainstream sort of media probably doesn't help in terms of the way that it explains some of the stuff. But, you take like, centralized finance, we had BlockFi and Celsius and, a number of other players go under. You take, exchanges and like FTX and a number of other smaller ones went under. And like consumers got burned on every single one of these. And it's going to take time, I think, for people to come back and actually use decentralized products because they didn't know the difference between them, right? So I do think it's still probably a while. I think you're probably going to see more of that adoption pick up in emerging markets. Realistically, like your probably closest moment to that, like what you were talking about, is probably gaming in the Philippines, right? Where more or less everyone was on it. And obviously that didn't end well either, right? Because you also had massive crash in asset prices, and a lot of people were actually got